we'd like to do in this panel is actually talk about three things. One, has the investment environment changed? Is there such a thing called CannaTech? Two, can Israel become a leader in this space, right? What do we have to offer? We have so many technologies related to cannabis. Agrotech, food tech, medical devices, everything. Just a mere adaptation, it's CannaTech. And three, will the traditional VCs actually take a leading role here, or will alternative investment vehicles emerge and take the lead? So I'm actually going to sit down. I have a little bit of a neck and back problem today, and join my distinguished panel. Welcome. It's great that you're here. And we've got, I wasn't actually supposed to introduce you, but I have your details with me. So we've got Gideon Soesman, who's the co-founder and managing partner at GreenSoil Investments. And Jeffrey Zucker, which is the president and co-founder of Green Lion Partners. And Dr. Hadar Sutovsky, who's a partner at AquAgro Fund. And Troppe, who is the CEO and co-founder of Tress Capital. And what we're going to do before we actually dive into the questions is let our panelists quickly introduce themselves and their interests in the cannabis space. Also talk a little bit about the companies that you represent, so the VCs that you represent. Asher, we're going to start with you.
Hello. Hi. My name is Asher Troppe. I'm a co-founder of Tress Capital, which is a strategic cannabis investment firm based in New York City. We help investors navigate the environment and help get them positioned and educated. And on the industry side, we support our portfolio and client companies with their strategic efforts and opportunity creation.
Thank you, Asher. Hi, my name is Hadar. I'm a general partner at AquAgro Fund. The fund is an impact fund specializing in investment in agriculture, food, and water technologies. We are actually right now during fundraising of the second fund with target $200 million. We plan to invest also in cannabis technologies as part of the agriculture space.
Hi, is that working? I'm Jeffrey Zucker, president of Green Lion Partners. We were started a couple of years ago doing business strategy for early stage companies in the cannabis industry. So we help companies raise, pitch, scale, as well as helping investors place capital. But for the most part, we spend our time as entrepreneurs running 3 companies within the industry. And we mostly work on the ancillary side of the industry. And it's something we're really passionate about. We're really strongly feel that we want to help build a foundation to this industry along with everyone else here and help to improve the public perception of the space and just show what a boon it can be for so many economies.
Good morning. I have to tell I'm a little bit nervous because on the way to stage, 3 people told us how to hold the microphone. So I hope we're doing a good job. I founded and manage GreenSoil Investments. We are a global investment company with offices in Toronto and here in Israel. In Toronto, we manage a fund that invests in building innovations, and here in Israel, we're the largest dedicated ag and food tech fund. We have 6 companies in our current portfolio, and like Hadar, we're as well setting up our next ag and food tech fund.
All right, thank you for the introduction. For those of you who came in late because the room is quickly filling up, which is nice, this is our investment panel, and we're going to focus on 3 questions. One is why Silicon Valley investors are shying away from investing in CannaTech, and has there been any change in the investment environment? 2, will VCs take the lead, or will alternative investment vehicles take the lead on the front? And the third question is, what does Israel have to offer? Can it really stand out in the crowd and take a leadership role in the space? So I'm actually going to start with you, Jeff, and you're based in Denver, I believe, right?
That's
and
correct.
ask you about the current investment climate. What is the current investment climate in the U.S., specifically in Denver? And then maybe have Gideon talk about the climate here in Israel, just so we get the feeling of how does it look, from across both sides.
Well, there's a lot of hype around cannabis, and I'll speak about the United States specifically. There is a lot of hype around it, and there's a lot of people that are looking to get involved. I'm seeing more and more private, smaller investors get involved in the industry. There's still hesitance from the larger institutions to get involved in the space, considering the federal illegality. That does provide some more time for some of the smaller guys in the space to get involved. And it's really the appetite for investment in the space has really only been increasing. As we had this administration change recently, there was some hesitation coming in from investors. We did see a little bit less movement right in between, the election and up until the last few months. But as the industry listens to more and more of what the administration is saying, they're getting more and more comfortable. I think for the most part, we feel the administration is going to leave it as a states' rights issue, especially on the medical side, but we're also hopeful on the adult use side as well. And it's a space that I think more and more investors are going to continue to pile in here from the United States. And I think this is going to be definitely the biggest year yet.
So in connections with technologies relating to cannabis, specifically CannaTech, do you see a difference in attitude between the recreational and the medical-related technologies?
There are definitely people and institutions that create that fine barrier between the two. However, I think that because so many of the technologies truly apply to both, most people seem to be open-minded on the topic. My stance really is why I like to call it adult use versus recreational, is because a lot of adults that are going to be using cannabis in these open markets are using it for reasons other than recreation. Just because they don't have the confidence or don't have the know-how or don't want to go to a doctor to get a prescription, that doesn't mean that they're not going and buying cannabis at the dispensary to help them sleep or to help their pain management.
Right.
So really there are certain investors that differentiate. However, I think that long term, there's still going to be a differentiated market. There's different products that will be specifically medical and very tailored to that market. But long term, I see the investment more spreading across both.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Gideon, from Israel, what is your take on it?
So I think first of all, as a general observation, we're looking at an evolving market, which is always interesting. What of course worries when you're talking about an evolving market, and you just said it, is that it may be seen by some investors as a hype. So you want to be careful. You don't want to go into a dot-com like investment as we saw that in the 90s. What we see in Israel is of course as always a very big focus on the technology part. Less the farming and the growing, which is of course you need more skill, which you find in places that are better equipped to that.
And of course, recreational is illegal.
Yeah.
So
Right, and I think another interesting observation is worldwide and also in Israel is that so far most of the investments have been done by dedicated investors that are entirely focused on the space. And you now see that the more generalist players, and when I'm talking about generalists, I'm looking mostly ag and food tech investors, but you can also, of course, look at the pharmaceutical tech investors. They're now starting to take a look. We haven't seen many investments. I mean, if you look at the numbers, last year, according to Ag Thunder, the entire investments in ag tech was about $3.5 billion worldwide. Out of that, less than 100 million in cannabis tech, so that's what is it, somewhere 2 to 3%. But you see that all the big players are now starting to look what's happening here, and I do expect that both worldwide but also in Israel, that those more general players will start doing some investments in the next 1 or 2 years.
right, I actually agree with the observation, and Hadar, I think you want to comment on it as well.
Yeah, actually, you see a lot of, in the past 2 years, you see that investments are booming in the area of cannabis. 2015 was was a peak, I guess. It was a pure play investment in cannabis, around $225 million only in cannabis
Right.
technologies and cannabis. All around the supply chain loop. One of the Israeli companies that got $20 million investment from Philip Morris was Psych.
Right.
They got 20 million investment from Philip Morris. They develop and still developing an inhaler to actually increase the precision of the dosaging of cannabis to patients. A little bit more about the Israeli ecosystem.
Sure.
Since the most frightening thing was Israel will not allow export of cannabis or cannabis products. This has been changed recently in January. There was the law, and the government has voted for allowing export of Israeli cannabis, but medical cannabis. So they will take out the medical cannabis from the general drug law, and they will allow export of cannabis and medical cannabis product to the global market. And this opens the door to creating more opportunities for the Israeli market.
I agree.
Because everybody was afraid that this is a barrier, that the Israeli ecosystem will not be able to survive. It's blooming, but yet the Israeli consumption or the Israeli market for medical cannabis is only 28,000 patients, and that's it. But if we truly open the doors for export, here comes the opportunity.
I absolutely agree, and we're actually going to move forward to Asher and ask, how are things looking from New York?
In the United States, over the past several months, we've seen a pretty steep pickup in that institutional interest in the market.
Mm-hmm.
We see larger average bite sizes of investment looking to allocate into the market. It's definitely the fastest growing segment of inbound investor interest that we see, while it's still a small segment. Right?
The fastest growing sector.
So first to us, if I break up the data, we're at about 60% of our inbound.
Can you talk closer to the mic?
60% of our inbound indications of interest from investors come from high net worth individuals. Approximately 25% come from family offices.
Right.
And the remainder is split between institutions and corporates.
So very few VCs,
Right.
if
So
at
I put
all,
them in the,
except for Peter. Right.
Except for Peter, but we're
And
seeing,
privateer, yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing definitely more people reaching out, and they're from multi-billion-dollar institutions, and they're either from investment companies in the mainstream private equity firms. One example would be a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm in the mainstream that has an agricultural company.
Right.
That's getting into the space, right? So that kind of company can come into the industry and disrupt very fast with existing infrastructure, right? Things that not everybody is thinking about when they're driving the cars on the highways, not to be able to see the canvas over top. Definitely seeing a lot of that. We're seeing more media names,
Mm-hmm.
more global entertainers getting involved. One example on the institutional side was that we worked with Bloomberg this past fall to host Bloomberg's first event on cannabis in New York City.
Interesting.
And they hosted institutional investors and family offices. And the interest was so strong that they had about 5 times as many RSVPs than they had thought.
Wow.
And I said to them beforehand, say, guys, this is an interesting area. This is not just your regular stocks and bonds. So there is a lot of interest. Yeah.
So, I have to ask you, there are numerous risks associated with investments in CannaTech or cannabis-related companies. And VCs have shown that they could be very smart in diving into new areas that can create multiples. Why are they shying away from CannaTech investments? And why are these family offices and high net worth individuals and other institutional investors that you're referring to, why are they looking into it?
Why are they
Do
looking?
they understand the risks?
Yeah.
What are the
Most
risks?
of them, as they approach us, they understand risks, right? So, but what they don't always understand is the whole range of risks, right? You know, some are the obvious. So, federal versus state in the U.S., right? For instance. But there are a whole hosts of market risks that people don't necessarily pay enough attention to. You know, and we can go through them, and some of them are the same, just like any other sector, and some are unique to our sector, right? So, disruption, right? We're in a very, very dynamic field, right? You see what's going on behind me, behind all of us, the amazing things that people are doing, right? Well, any of those guys may come up with something really interesting that might knock out the business of 10 other people, but it might create a lot of social value and other economic
But that doesn't
value.
really differ from other venture capital investments.
Correct.
You know, you're always looking for the right team. You're looking at the barriers for entry. You're looking at disruptive technology, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Where's the difference? Where's the difference? Why do VCs not invest in the space other than the excellent ones who's joined the panel?
Yeah.
I mean, we know all the VCs in Israel, and
Yeah.
so very few of them, despite the fact that they focus on medical devices and pharma and agrotech and food tech and anything that has to do from the growing of the plant until the consumption of the plant.
Yeah.
And they're not into cannabis. What are the risks? Is it just the nature of it? Is it because you can't talk about it over Thanksgiving dinner?
These days, more and more you can, right?
There's nothing better than talking about it over Thanksgiving
Absolutely.
dinner.
We should have a Thanksgiving dinner
Look,
in Israel.
You
as well.
have
Yeah.
there are a lot of regulatory issues, and they change, you know, seemingly every day within a country, within a state, within a county, within a local municipality.
Right. So regulation is one.
Right. Regulation is one.
We had that with the clean tech ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
The big downturn in 2008. Regulation
Absolutely.
killed the clean tech
and
ecosystem.
that's probably the biggest one that is so highly dynamic and so highly affects businesses in the industry. And that's something an investor must keep up on top of all the time.
Right.
If they're investing in cannabis companies. So they either need to do it themselves or be working with people who are doing that all the time.
Can investments in the space create multiples? I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to refer to Jeff on this question as well. Can we see multiples here? Because VCs don't invest in good companies, solid companies that can distribute dividends. They're looking to make, right, a good
Multiples.
multiple on their investment. Can it create multiples?
Absolutely. We just had a recent investment that we made, actually. Made an investment 15 months ago, about. And this company just did a follow-on round at about 3.5x. So it's just a little over a year, 3.5x, and they're
That's
just
amazing.
getting going.
That's amazing, even in VC
And I think the
terms.
other ones that we're invested in, we'll see similar kinds of trajectories in some form or another.
Okay.
You know, globally in a portfolio, you have winners and losers, but this is definitely a space where multiples are what people are going to see.
Okay. Jeff, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. I think in terms of multiples in this space, it's something that we're going to see great returns. It's just a little bit more of a long-term play. I think the people that are coming in now and expecting immediate returns, maybe they're going more into cultivation and dispensaries, but you know that's a very dynamic space that's changing a lot. Whereas you know if you're investing in CannaTech, that's something that you know 5 years down the road you're going to see 10x and more.
Right. And
I think you
yeah.
will see the multiples. The question is, where are you going to find them? Which also comes back to the risk factor. So, of course, the fact it's a highly regulated sector, we investors don't like that because it's a risk. I think a second risk is that we see a land grab of...
But this is not really different from the pharma sector or the clean tech sector. There are other sectors that are highly regulated. I mean, why is CannaTech different?
Probably because of the subject matter, it can go one direction and a year later it can go back in the other direction. I mean, look what happened just in the United States. So you don't see a stable path of regulation going into certain directions. It can go up and down and back and forward in different regions, which makes it a little bit risky.
More difficult.
I think a second one is that you see a land grab of investors coming in. And also a lot of I think one of you mentioned it, smaller investors maybe that don't have the experience from the show business, that like the space. It's a risk factor.
Actually, I think that Green Lion, and I'm looking at your bio. Can I quote from your bio?
Sure.
So Jeff is a serial entrepreneur, for those of you who've not known this, in real estate, film production, tech, and cannabis. So do you really need to come from real estate and film production to be brave enough to invest in cannabis? Tell us about the type of investments that you're looking to make here in Israel, because we've got a lot of, I think, entrepreneurs in the audience.
Sure. So, the real estate business is, I've been fortunate enough that it provides me the opportunity to invest in cannabis. And, we're always looking for dynamic companies, mostly on the ancillary side. So software, services, accessories that can grow alongside the industry, but are less susceptible to the risk factors that we've been discussing, that are less susceptible to regulation and to, there's still plenty of disruption, but, less of that.
Yeah.
And so that, those are the types of companies that we look for and we try to help investors also place capital with is companies that are, for instance, I'll plug one of our investments, one of our portfolio companies. FlowHub is an enterprise software for the cannabis industry, and what makes them so different is that they were built from the ground up for the space. The CEO, worked in cultivations, learned about the true problems in the space, and those are the types of companies we were looking for. The ones that are really digging in, getting in depth in the industry, figuring out what the problems are, and finding the best way to solve them in a way that's scalable, especially in the States. We've got so many more states to still come on board.
Yeah.
So really it's about building a foundation that can scale with this space and is going to solve the problems. So that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. But you said that this is an enterprise software company. So, remarkable. That's such a traditional area. And can you talk a little bit about the size of the checks that you cut? I mean, is it pre-seed, seed investments?
We're generally seed investors. Anywhere from 50,000, where we rarely do, but we've gone up to $1 million. And at this point in time, our company has mostly invested our budget for the space, and we're like I said earlier, we're running 3 companies as well, so we're going to try to take these to the next level. And in the meantime, we're helping some investors place capital as well.
Okay, I'm actually going to refer the identical questions to everyone because of the entrepreneurs out here. Talk about the kind of investments that you're looking to make and the types of checks that you cut, and then Hadar and Asher will do the same.
So we invest in what we call early growth. We want to see product, we want to see market traction, Series A. In our next fund, we'll go more towards Series B, Series C. We're, of course, looking for the general stuff like in every area, which is a good entrepreneur who's done his homework, who knows where he's going with a great team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think within this space specifically, we're looking for sustainable technologies that are scalable. We will not invest in farming, cultivation, growing that area. It's really about the technology and about the scalability of it.
Okay. And Hadar?
Yeah. So first, if I can relate to the other topic or
Sure.
same area, you can see mainly lately, let's say at the past 2 or 4 years, more and more pure players and VCs that are fully dedicated to only cannabis, and less you see VCs or fund of funds that do more than one investment in cannabis. And this is because of the risk, because of it's still the nascency of the space, maybe the controversy around the topic in many territories,
also, it's also
highly regulated, not stable, so not everybody is willing to get into a full portfolio of cannabis technologies. But you can see more and more new accelerators around the cannabis area, like Canopy Boulder and also in Israel. Mm-hmm. So more accelerators supporting seed and early stage companies and technologies is nice. It's creating more movement into the space as well.
And AquAgro, I believe, has made an investment either through the fund or
maybe
just for full disclosure.
Yeah, maybe
I also
outside
work
of
with
the fund, but you can see, we don't invest we don't do project financing or farming, so we will not invest in opportunities like building new farms in Colorado or in Washington, or turnkey project like that. What we need to see is really innovative technologies that are around the space but of course on the value chain of agriculture, not e-commerce or delivery or let's say social media, software. This is not our space, so we are not looking at that area. We would like to see maybe tissue culture, maybe in the side of the inputs and the breeding, but yet technologies that we can create a full pipeline of products that could create a sustainable business, later on be attractive to as a candidate to acquisition of a bigger maybe agriculture or maybe a medical company that would like to get into the space of cannabis. A technology that we see that is entering a market and could have a market share that is large enough to create a sustainable business. What else? Well, I think I explained myself pretty good, but it should be on the value chain of agriculture. What we see in the cannabis area is that startups are starting to feel the pain of the value chain or the supply chain of all the supply chain of cannabis from farm to pharma, let's say.
Right.
So this is why you can see all the layers of technologies, not only breeding or not only plant extraction. This brings me back to the point where we are looking at maybe innovative methods of active ingredient extraction to be able to create better cannabis products down the road.
But I think it's far greater than that. I mean, Jeff has talked about an enterprise software company, which comes from the cannabis world and is dedicated to the space. And what we're seeing at the firm, because we work with hundreds of startup companies, and we're seeing a lot of deal flow on the CannaTech space. We're seeing a lot of companies which are actually originally IoT companies, and now they're IoT in cannabis, right? And they're a medical devices company like Psych, right? It's a medical device, the puff. And now they're a medical device in CannaTech. So I think there's a lot of education. We still need to educate the public, and we'll see more VC activity here in Israel. I hope so, because there's so much knowledge in other industries that really all it needs to do is migrate into the CannaTech space. And I actually want to refer the same question to you as well.
And that's happening, by the way. We are definitely seeing operational expertise coming from outside of cannabis, quickly coming into cannabis. Our bite sizes, we're about to launch a flagship diversified fund. So in this fund, we're going to allocate 20% to early stage and 80% or so to growth capital.
Good. And what would be the size of that fund?
Yeah, and so for early stage, that would be in this $50,000 all the way up to $1 million, $2 million potentially, even in an early stage, under the right circumstances. And that kind of thing does happen. And Series A, that's where our current sweet spot is. But I think as the industry matures and as our portfolio companies mature, like we have a portfolio company, SC Labs, we just did their Series A. They'll go on to do a Series B, and that's something we would get behind as well, right? So we would look to support the companies we're already investing in through those future rounds, and as the marketplace itself matures and the rounds go naturally through the cycle. In terms of what we invest in, we invest end-to-end through the supply chain and the industry spectrum with a focus on what we think of as infrastructure. So SC Labs, lab testing, it's a regulated safety checkpoint in the supply chain. We're invested in a company called Headset, which is a data company, right? We're invested in sorry?
Great examples.
Right. A company called Baker. They do digital customer engagement platform. It's a POS platform. They're seeing great traction. And all of these companies, interestingly, are collecting tons and tons of data, all of them. And that's a very fascinating thing. And data itself It's an interesting topic.
Absolutely. By the way, I've seen a few e-commerce and a few market hubs startups in the cannabis space. I know that we have to wrap. I think that we have 3 more minutes, or do we need to wrap altogether?
Yeah, no, I wanted to give the audience a chance to maybe ask some questions as well. I know this is one of the panels
I see there's a hand over there.
over here. All right. So I'm going to ask you to stand, and she's going to give you a microphone. Tell them who you are, and then ask your question, please. Here you go.
Okay,
Oh, she's got it. There you go. All right.
thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Kevin McGovern Capital. We're a U.S. family office. We have 5 investments in cannabis, 3 in Israel, 2 in the U.S. And I just think that to give a full perspective here, I think it's a bit of a tale of many cities. In the U.S., some of us are waiting for the Sessions memo. And I know for a fact there's a small group at the Department of Justice that's about to write it. What they'll say about recreational cannabis, we're not sure, but it's going to have an effect on the U.S. market.
We do need a question,
Yeah,
sir.
for sure.
Okay. What in Israel?
Oh, actually, it's a very interesting statement.
Sure, absolutely, and I want to know who you know up there. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. All right.
You can do this the Israeli way.
What do
you give a lecture, and then at the end you ask, "Do you agree?"
Yeah, okay. But what in Israel is going to hold you back? It sounds like Israel is moving in a progressive way. We're investing here. We want to know, what are the roadblocks that you're fearing the most about investments in Israel?
Great question.
Right. You seem to be the Israeli guy on the panel.
Or the Israeli lady.
Or Hadar, the Israeli lady, yeah.
So I think we mentioned it already before. What we were afraid of all these years, and lately it might change, that the government didn't allow us to export cannabis or seeds. So any material could not leave the premises of the country. We are expert in breeding. We are expert in creating a new species that could change the levels of CBD and THC and all that is needed in this space, but we couldn't export it. So the problem was we couldn't export knowledge and technologies outside. What we could export was all the peripheral technologies, like diagnostics, any other quality assurance and quality control technologies, infrared technologies, any kind of that products, and end products that goes to the pharma and are highly regulated but need to go all the way in the medical device or pharma APIs. Nowadays, it might be that this barrier is becoming lower, and we would invest more in upstream the value chain, the agriculture value chain of cannabis.
Are there examples of folks that are exporting already or setting up to export?
Not yet. What we have is 8 farms so far, but there will be more. Right? Am I right?
I think there are 8 funds.
There are already more.
I'm going to refer to my partner here, Yoav, who just gave a wonderful lecture upstairs about this. We've got 8 farms, and export.
Bring in the mic.
Not yet.
Yeah, hold on.
Second and
somebody will give you a mic for a second.
Just if I may add, if you're going to expect Israeli success stories from the farms, I wouldn't expect to see them over there. I would expect to see them in the technology space. And in that sense, like in every sector in Israel, if there's one thing that Israeli companies know how to do, it's to go global from day one. Because we don't have a market. Not for medical devices, not for food, not for ag, and not for cannabis.
But we've got outstanding technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why on the regulatory front, what's happening today in the United States, it's much more interesting for Israeli startups than what's happening in the Israeli regulation.
Asher, I got a question for you, if you don't mind. You had mentioned, it's me here. First off, you had mentioned a company that you already have 3.5x back on. Do you care to share what company that is?
I'm not sure if I can do that.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. As far as Joel from Baker, as far as Cy from Headset, How much are you investing in the data versus the team versus the data, that almost perfect, combination of everything?
Awesome question, and it was one of those, by the way.
Aha, okay, so down to 2, fair enough.
Okay.
Both of them started out as the team.
Right.
As it turns out, the team is what drove our investment in both. In terms of Headset was founded by a group of guys who are awesome guys and who built Leafly,
Right.
which many of you know of, and which already achieved an exit. And then they went on to start their next enterprise in cannabis, Headset, data analytics and business intelligence platform. That would be one example.
Are you chasing data, or are you, is that really it? Is that the play?
It's not our primary objective.
It isn't?
And I think it's somewhat incidental.
Okay.
But we do see data as certainly an area to pay attention to, and to have an approach to. And as we look across our portfolio companies, SC Labs has the largest collection of tested cannabis data on the globe.
Well, Steep Hill might disagree, but that's fair.
We might have the data.
I just have to mention they're a sponsor, so I gotta, SC's not here. They're in California. Any other questions for the group here?
Do we have anyone from Silicon Valley, San Francisco, San Jose, Sandy Road? The guy with the mic? Who's here?
Who? Where?
Raise
Over
your hand.
here and
Where are
there?
you from?
Which one are we doing first? Who are you talking to? Should we do the beard or the hair? Let's do the beard. All right. So everybody wants to know about you. Oh, it's one of Ben's guys. All right, go ahead.
JP Martin from GrowX, based out of Oakland, California.
Tell them more.
Okay.
GrowX develops AI-controlled aeroponic systems.
Oh, we're looking for AI. It's over here.
That's interesting. That's
There we
interesting.
go. All right, I'm coming to the hair over here.
Okay.
Hold on one second. This is fabulous. It really is. You have to tell you're from Silicon Valley? Okay. What's the company name?
I'm actually an independent consultant working with
Come on, we're looking for companies, but go on.
former Palantir and working with a small company right now that does data analytics and creates a data platform for literally anybody, primarily focusing on law enforcement to put their data and share their data with any other organization with fine-grained access controls.
There's data again. And how's Peter doing, by the way? Former Palantir, right?
I mean, he's always doing good. He's a billionaire.
Right. Okay, fantastic. There you go. That was your Peter Thiel, Phil.
Yeah.
Do you want to have a final question for the panelists?
Yeah, actually, I want to wrap by saying that if you guys were here for my opening remarks, I think that we've managed to establish that there's been a change in the investment environment, both in the US and in Israel. We're actually aware of a change in other places in the world. I think we've also managed to establish that VCs will play a part in the CannaTech space, but not very much a major part. At least they're not playing such a part nowadays. And we'll see more and more high net worth individuals, family offices, and some institutional investors investing, and some very brave and bold funds coming out of Israel, and maybe, hopefully, from Silicon Valley next time you host this panel next year. And I'd still, I kind of like to ask you, when we think about the industry here in Israel, I mean, what would be, let's put aside the growers and the agrotech and the food, and we've got so much technology. I mean, look at what has happened with Mobileye here, or Waze, or other segments. What can we pull from these segments, right?
These will be rapid fire answers, if you don't mind.
Okay. In just a few words. Go ahead, Asher.
We pull from that?
From other segments, industries that we have here in Israel, from IoT, from software enterprise, from whatever.
I think we're seeing it happening right now in all kinds of industries coming in, and there's a lot of crossbreeding and a lot of value coming in from all of those different areas.
Okay, Hadar?
Well, it's already happening in agriculture when you see precision ag already taking a huge part of the sector and the investments. So again, if you want precision irrigation or any kind of pesticides control,
Right.
using augmented reality or using a multiple data algorithm that is combining weather control and cameras and from the satellites that are combining all kinds of inputs into one algorithm that can make the growers or can actually support the decision making in the area. So that's for growing and that's for any kind of decision making in the space.
Yeah.
This
is interesting because you've also mentioned augmented reality in connection with irrigation, etc. So this is a really interesting take. Jeff?
I think overall the technology in Israel is going to push forward that tech on the cannabis side, and I think it's important for entrepreneurs in Israel to focus on what they're good at and figure out how they can best take that into the cannabis industry, because I think that there are so many opportunities and many that people don't initially think about. And there's so many ways that great technologies here can be applied to this industry.
I agree.
I think major strength here will be to combine different disciplines from different sectors, because we have so much concentrated on a small piece of land. From the people coming out of the army, people coming out of the medtech, people coming out of the AgTech, and combining that. We see it already in our portfolio. People with very different backgrounds coming together and creating something totally new. Add to that the can-do mentality in Israel, and I think you'll see a lot of exciting stuff coming out of here.
Well, we can only say amen to that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the panelists.
Thank you, Ayelet.
And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Ayelet and all the panelists there.